gift that we want to partner with our families with. I don't know if you've heard of resurrection eggs before, but there is an egg in here that, or there are eggs, plural. There are eggs in here that have to do with the story of Easter. And so, like the egg that I'm looking at here is the rooster. And if you follow the story of Easter, you know that Jesus said to Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And so there's a little discipleship, a little Bible study inside the pamphlet in here. We're giving it to you 2 weeks early so that you can maybe weave it in nightly as you wind down your day or whatever. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have questions. At the end, there is a little section where it talks about if your child then determines that they want to ask Jesus to be the Lord of their life. It walks you through how to do that with your child. But we want to be a resource for you, so if you have any questions, please reach out to us. But for every family unit, when you leave today, whether your kids are, if you think your kids are into this, we're not gonna keep you from getting one. If you have grandkids that you would like to do this with, you can take it for your grandkids, okay? So they're back there on the table. Just feel free to grab one as you leave today, okay? Awesome. Easter is just 2 more Sundays away, church. It's coming. So.
It's good to see you guys this morning. I have a few announcements for you. If you are visiting with us, we want to just thank you for coming, give you a gift, answer any questions you might have. So after the service, I'll be back at guest services, which is out by the One Cup Cafe. If you want to come see me there, and we'd love to get you a gift for being here. Another thing is this, on April 11th, we are going to be having baptisms. And for us, baptisms is an outward expression of what Christ has already done inside of us. So if you're interested in signing up to be baptized on April 11th, you can do so by signing up online at everythingchurch.cc. There's a special tab there that you can find to sign up for the baptisms there. Or reach out if you have any questions about it, and we'd be happy to talk you through that. Another update is that we have a new way that if you want to track your giving or give via an app, we now have our stuff on the Church Center app, so you are welcome to download that and either give or track your giving that way. And then lastly this morning, I just want to say thank you to you guys. Thank you to all of you who serve in various capacities, either with our kids in the back, cleaning the church throughout the week to make sure it's safe and sanitary, come in to serve coffee or at the door, or just giving with your money. We know that it's a sacrifice, and so we just want to take a moment to say thank you for supporting the mission of Rethink Church and the community, and allowing us to serve the community in those ways and being a part of that with us. If you do want to give here at Rethink Church, you can either give online, give at the Church Center app, or there's the black box in the back by the door if you want to give in person. We're glad to have you guys here this morning. Lean in as we continue in our sermon series.
Matthew 20, verses 17 through 34. Excuse me. Jesus, now well on the way up to Jerusalem, took the 12 off to the side of the road and said, "Listen to me carefully. We are on our way up to Jerusalem. When we get there, the Son of Man will be betrayed to the religious leaders and scholars. They will sentence him to death. They will then hand him over to the Romans for mockery and torture and crucifixion. On the third day, he will be raised up alive. It was about that time that the mother of the Zebedee brothers came with her 2 sons and knelt before Jesus with a request. "What do you want?" Jesus asked. She said, "Give your word that these 2 sons of mine will be awarded the highest places of honor in your kingdom, one at your right hand, one at your left hand." Jesus responded, "You have no idea what you're asking." And he said to James and John, "Are you capable of drinking the cup that I'm about to drink?" And they said, "Sure, why not?" Jesus said, "Come to think of it, you are going to drink my cup. But as to awarding the places of honor, that's not my business. My Father is taking care of that." Then when the 10 others heard about this, they lost their tempers, thoroughly disgusted with the 2 brothers. So Jesus got them together to settle things down. He said, "You've observed how godless rulers throw their weight around, how quickly a little power goes to their heads. It's not going to be that way with you. Whoever wants to be great must be a servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be a slave. That is what the Son of Man has done. He came to serve, not be served, and then to give away his life in exchange for the many who are held hostage." As they were leaving Jericho, a huge crowd followed. Suddenly they came upon 2 blind men sitting alongside the road. When they heard it was Jesus passing, they cried out, "Master, have mercy on us. Mercy, Son of David." The crowd tried to hush them up, but they got all the louder, crying, "Master, have mercy on us. Mercy, Son of David." Jesus stopped and called over, "What do you want from me?" They said, "Master, we want our eyes open. We want to see." Deeply moved, Jesus touched their eyes. They had their sight back that very instant and joined the procession.
Well, awesome. Well, hey, thank you, Mike. So some of you guys know that Heather and I were gone, or sons were gone as well last week. So thank you for your prayers. We actually went down and moved my mom back up to Indiana from Georgia after the death of my stepdad and all that. So thank you guys for your prayers and all that. Roland did a great job. If you missed it, you can find up on our Vimeo and all that. We think Church 219 does all of that stuff. But the passage that we just led up to. Now, you know we've been working through Matthew, the Gospel according to Matthew. And like we're going to end as Jesus is entering the city of Jerusalem. And we said, hey, we're going to pause because it's Easter. We should probably talk about Palm Sunday and Easter. We really probably just could have kept going because we're right there in 21, right? So, but here we are. We got to tackle this one, and this is a lot of context, right? A lot of passage. But here, in my opinion, I actually think it's one massive thought, one big picture thing here. And we're going to pause and kind of dissect it and stuff like that. And we've heard this city of Jerusalem. If you've read the Bible and all this, you see this city come up over and over and over again. This is a city that is just kind of laced all the way through this. And when it says like Jesus is on his way, like he's intentionally going from Jericho to Jerusalem. We read that and we're like, oh yeah, like going from Maryville to Crown Point, right? Like that's it. But take a look at this picture and tell me how easy this would be to go from Jericho to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is that little green circle at the very top. You can see the mountains. Jericho's on the very, very bottom where it says Herod's Palace in Jericho. They're not just going down, like they're literally climbing up a mountain all the way up there. And this is going to take a while. This is probably a 6 to 7 mile trek if you could just make it one shot. But as they're doing this, they're going over mountains, going up down into valleys and all this other stuff. And so there's all these other things that are that are part of this. I love allergy season, by the way. But as they're doing this, you can see this, like Jesus is intentionally saying, we're not getting sidetracked anymore. We're headed to Jerusalem. Now, I'm going to pause and just kind of walk through what is Jerusalem, what's the significance of Jerusalem, especially to Jesus. Now, the first time we see the city of Jerusalem mentioned in the Bible is all the way back in Genesis chapter 14. And let me give you the context of what's going on in Genesis chapter 14. This guy named Abram, who is Israel's like patriarch, like the big top tier guy. Like when we say American presidents, we say George Washington is the guy, like the first one, right? So like he's got to be one of the greatest. I think a lot of historians' minds and all that. But when you think of like the most important people's mindset for the Israelites, Abraham is like right up there. He is one of the top guys. So while he's there, he has a nephew named Lot. They get to this point where like their families and their groups get so big that they start bickering over stuff and like quarreling and stuff like that. So Abram and Lot get together like, hey, Abraham goes, if you choose to go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left. And we'll just kind of part ways and go from there. And so they did that. And so as they were doing this, Lot chooses to go to this one particular city, and 4 kings from the far east kind of come into like the Canaanite area and like, hey, let's just ransack this whole place. And so they did that. So this was part of how they would do this in the old, like in the ancient world. They would just raid the places, take whatever they wanted, and take them back to their houses. And they would claim the territory, claim the plunder and all that. And so the 4 kings from the east, they come and do this. Word gets to Abraham like, hey, like these 5 kings were just defeated in the Canaanite area. Like this is a pretty big deal. So Abram raises an army of 318 men, like you do, because, you know, why not? So somehow Abraham has some significant wealth here, right? Because you can't just go out and hire an army. Like at Carson, you probably can't do that, so enjoy that. But Abraham can, for whatever reason. So he does this, and he goes out and he pursues and defeats the 4 kings from the east. So on his way back into his home area, he's traveling through the Canaanite area. The king of Sodom and the king of Salem, or Jerusalem, come out and they congratulate him. Sodom is like, hey, give me some of what you get and take back. The king of Salem, whose name is King Melchizedek, comes out and he brings bread and wine. Now, you may be thinking, I'm just like, if I'm Abraham, I don't want bread and warm wine after I've just pursued these kings and like Sodom down. Like, right? Like, nothing smells like refreshment like warm wine and bread, right? Like, but this is a meal of peace in the ancient world. So Melchizedek is bringing this meal of peace to Abraham. And all of a sudden, like in the midst of this meal, Abraham stops and he recognizes there's something different about him. He understands that Melchizedek is a priest of God Most High. And that phrase right here is crucial. Abraham was called out of the land of Chaldeans by the God Most High. Daniel will use this phrase when he talks about like the principalities and the kings and all that of God Most High. This phrase of God Most High is a key to understanding who Melchizedek truly is. And so here's Melchizedek, and he's like sitting there, and Abraham blesses, like gives him a tithe, like 10% of everything he just has. He understands that Melchizedek is something special, something different about him. He's the king of righteousness is what his name is actually translated as. And so as Abraham gives him this tithe, then all of a sudden Melchizedek blesses Abraham, but he's the king of Salem. It's this crucial thing of like the word of king of righteousness. There's something about his name that we need to like kind of think about. Righteousness is are you in right standing with God? This was the function of the king and the priesthood right here, right? Like he wants to make sure that he can bring the people of the city of Jerusalem into a righteousness with God Most High. And that's his function. If you want to know more about who Melchizedek was, you can look up at Psalm 110. And the prophet, the psalmist says this, that the Messiah, this coming Messiah, is going to be in the order of the priesthood of Melchizedek. In Hebrews chapter 7 talks about who Melchizedek's true identity really was. And I'll let you read that on your own, and we have a lot of discussions over coffee. It takes a lot, there's just a whole lot of things. And I was telling Heather and Betsy as we were getting ready for this week, we're going to lead down this rabbit hole, and then we're just going to leave it for you. So there you go. That's just the teaser, and we're going to go from there. The next time we see Jerusalem in the city in the story of the biblical narrative, we see them first name in chapter 17. This group of the people called the Philistines coming from the southwest into Israel land because they're landlocked and they need more space. Now, just like the 4 kings of the east, they're trying to raid the area and take it over. And Jerusalem is not an Israelite city at this point. This is King David. This is about 1,000 years before Jesus. So this army of the Philistines are led by this guy named Goliath, this champion of a warrior. He stands like he's a huge man, right? And he has all this armor that is kind of decked out. And so he stands in this valley of Elah. Now, the Shephelah region are these series of mountains, and you just saw this in this picture here. You just see this, right? You can see all these valleys and the mountains and stuff like that. Well, the Shephelah region is full of all these valleys, and the valley of Elah is where they met. So Israel's armies come down and meet him there, and this is the premise. Like, hey, I'm going to fight your best warrior. If I win, then the Philistines win. But if he beats me, then the Israelites will win, and we'll just call it good, right? This is an old way of doing a battle right here. And so as they're doing this, no one from the Israelite army is willing to show up. No one is willing to go out there and fight this battle. And so about 6 miles away is this guy named David from the village of Bethlehem. He's not of military age, so he's less than 20 years old. And he's going back and forth between the battle line and Bethlehem. And he's like, hey, I'm trying to bring word to my dad, probably getting the village ready, because the very next thing into this Elah Valley area is Bethlehem. So if the Philistines win, they're the next one on the list to get wiped out. So he probably want a heads up of like, hey, let's get ready, let's flee. You know, his dad's older and stuff like that. So he's trying to get all this stuff ready, and he's going back and forth. He's bringing food to his brothers. He's going back and forth, giving a report. And after about 40 days, he finally has enough of this. He shows up to the battle line, and he's like, are you guys doing anything about this? He looks at like his brothers, and they're like, well, we're not going out there. Like, how many times can you sit there and listen to somebody defy your God? And so he's like, forget it, I'll do it. He volunteers to do it. And his brothers get like angry about it, like, how dare you do this and stuff like that. And Saul, the king, the first king of Israel, hears about this. He's like, well, if you're going to go out and fight this, you need to be decked out into this armor as well. So he puts his armor on David, and David's like, can't even walk in this, right? And so as he says, forget this, he takes the armor off. He grabs 5 smooth stones. Now, these stones are about the size of a softball. We're not talking little pebbles here. And so he goes into the valley, and most military experts think that the battle is done as soon as he walks into the valley with gets to the 5 smooth stones. And here's why. There's 3 components of an ancient army. There's the infantry, which is hand-to-hand combat. Goliath is decked out like this, right? This is why he's a sword, a spear, a dagger, the chain of mail and all this, the sword, the shield and all this. What's unique about Goliath is that he's a shield bearer. Now, if you've ever watched like ancient world, like, you know, Hercules and all that, whatever that Brad Pitt movie is, where he goes out there, like, you're not trying to rely on the communication, like, hey, can you stand right here and fight, like, be my shield bearer? No. Most infantry people, they wanted to have their shield. Their shield was part of their armor, like how they did this. So there's something unique about him, why he has a shield bearer, because that's strange. The shield bearers were actually reserved for the second group, which were the projectile launchers. So those are archers and stuff like that, and slingers. Slingers were an actual ancient, like part of ancient armies. And so there's just documented over and over again. And so then the other one is cavalry. The cavalry people are like horses, they're like the tanks of the army, right? And so this David goes in there, he defeats Goliath, throws it, like launches a stone right into Goliath's head, and then he goes over and he grabs Goliath's sword and he cuts his head off. And then he does some very unique things with Goliath's head. By the way, like, I understand like we want to like mount like deer heads and stuff like that, but what do you think David's doing with his head? Like, he takes it to Saul, and he's like, hey, here's Goliath's head. Now, Goliath's a giant. Like, this head had to be massive, right? Now, if I kill this giant, I'm totally putting this up in my house. Like, dude, look what I did, right? Like, you know, braid his hair, play, like, whatever. I'd like dress him up. I'd do whatever I could, right? Well, David takes it to Saul, and he's like, hey, here you go. And then he takes it to the city of Jerusalem, which is not an Israelite city. Very strange thing to do. Jerusalem is its own little city-state, like its own little kingdom. I think what David actually did is he went over to Jerusalem saying, hey, Philistines are on their way, and the threat that was coming, you don't need to worry about it. Here's what I know. If we don't stand up against evil, there will be more victims than we ever anticipated. But if we stand up to evil, there will be more people freed because of our actions than we ever anticipated. David has no obligation to be like a fight for Jerusalem at this point, but yet he does. And the threats that were coming from the west are no longer threats for the city of Jerusalem or for the rest of the nation of Israel. And so when you and I face evil, don't think that it's just like the right thing to do. You are literally standing in a gap against evil and the other people. And there'll be more people affected and impacted than you can imagine. For whatever reason, David takes that head to Jerusalem. Several years later, David becomes the king, and he wants to make Jerusalem his capital city. So he conquers it, like you do when you're a king, right? Now, they were like, hey, just come on in. Like, we could actually, they said we could actually defend you, like, from anyone. And so David has to go through the water shaft, like where they would get the water, the well water from. And so he does that. He defeats the city of Jerusalem. And when he does, they throw a huge party. It's like this inauguration of like, man, this symbolized like unifying the entire kingdom, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, and now all of a sudden the Davidic kingdom is established, and nobody really messed with them. Like they would win battle after battle after battle. Their commerce was amazing. Like when Jesus' day, 1,000 years later, they think the good old days is what Jesus is going to come and reestablish. They think when they talk about Jesus' kingdom, they're thinking the kingdom just like David. Like borders are going to be established, Rome's going to be removed, taxes aren't going to be stupid high, like 85%. Like it's just going to be a normal way of living. And this is what they're hoping for. And so when Jesus is talking about like the city, like I'm going to Jerusalem, but he's going to come in and inaugurate his kingdom in a very unique way. His kingdom is actually going to be inaugurated by his death. And he tells them this, like, I'm going to be arrested, I'm going to be scourged, I'm going to be whipped and punished, and I'm going to be crucified. Now, when we say crucified, we think, oh yeah, that's kind of a vague thing. Like for them though, they understood this. They saw crucifixions all the time. As you headed into a town or a village, they were lined with crucifixions over and over again, saying, hey, the Romans would say, you cross us, you like somehow come against us, we're going to make a public display of you. And this is what they would do. As you went into the cities, you just saw them. Jesus and his followers probably would have seen thousands of crucifixions. And then he says, by the way, I'm going to be crucified, but I'll rise from the dead. Don't worry about it, right? Now, to me, I'm thinking, well, crucifixions, dead Messiah equals a like defeated Messiah. That seems weird. But Jesus just like goes on, right? This is the third time he's told about his arrest, his crucifixion, and his resurrection in Matthew so far. He's not keeping this a secret. And yet they can't figure this out. They can't figure out that Jesus' kingdom is going to be inaugurated by his death. And what does John and James's mom come and do? Hey, by the way, when your kingdom starts, can we have seats of authority and importance? Like, how insensitive is this? Every time I read this, I'm like, seriously, mom? Like, Zebedee mama? Like, back off, right? Like, think about this. Like, how painful do you think it was for Jesus to kind of walk through this? Like, this isn't just like I grew up watching Jesus, and he always looked stoned in the videos from the 80s in churches and stuff like that. But the pain that you could feel in Jesus, like you can almost feel the pain as he's saying this. I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to be scourged. I'm going to be crucified. And the great thing is that it's not the end of the story, right? But as you're reading this, you're like, man, that's a lot of painful things. And right when we think that death has its last say, Jesus says, no, resurrection is just around the corner. And when he says, like, when the mom comes and said, hey, can my son sit in the right and your left, I'll let you choose which one you want, right? Like, that's kind of the language here. Like, this is the picture that they're talking about. These are actual kingdoms, like, Chad, if you put that up. This is actually the imagery that they're putting on here, right? These three seats. And so as they're doing this isn't like vague language. Like, they have an understanding of what they're looking at, right? Now, if you're the rest of the disciples, how annoyed are you? Like, if you're Peter who's walked on water, don't you think I should have, like, if I'm Peter, like, I feel like, hey, I walked on water, dude, I should have one of these seats, right? Like, or if I'm Matthew, who, like, I was a tax collector and I gave this life up, right? Like, I should do all these kind of things. I should have these kind of seats of importance. But the mom just kind of steps right in here, right? And what does Jesus tell his disciples? Hey, if you want to be great in my kingdom, you have to learn how to serve others. Matthew's bringing this two ideas of these kingdoms together, and they're like colliding in this passage right here. These like one kingdom, and it's not necessarily Rome or Israel, it's like the kingdoms of this world, the ideologies of this, is all about influence and authority. It's all about power and positions and rankings and stuff like that. And if somebody hurts your feelings, you seek vengeance. right? And if somebody strikes you in your left, like eye for eye, tooth for tooth, all that kind of stuff. And Jesus is like, no, that's not what my kingdom is about. My kingdom is about everybody is welcome. It's diverse, it's wide. Like, it's not because you're born into it, it's going to be based on how you respond to faith and all this. Like, everyone is welcome. And when somebody hurts your feelings, you forgive. If somebody takes advantage of you, you're going to forgive them. Right? Like, it's two completely opposite kingdoms going on here. Jesus has been teaching this. He's been demonstrating this time and time again. And all of a sudden, in this passage, you can see these two kingdoms just colliding time and time again here. And what he's saying is like, hey, if you want to be great in my kingdom, it's not about rankings and positions and all that. It's all about how you actually serve each other. Especially when you serve people who are easily ignored. If you want to have greatness and significance, learn how to do that. And his disciples are just, I don't know if they got it in this passage. It just kind of feels like they're like, whatever. But Jesus uses a phrase of the Son of Man. And the Son of Man is echoing something from about 700 years before Jesus. This guy named Isaiah, he prophesies about this person of the Messiah, this person who's going to come and restore all of the kingdom of heaven. And so he's talking about this in Isaiah 32. He says this, like, the blind will see, the deaf will hear, the lame will walk, and the mute will shout. And what have we seen Jesus do time and time again throughout this passage, or this whole book, right? He's talking about this time and time again about, like, this is what the Messiah is going to do. So, as he's doing this, the disciples and the religious leaders have kind of fallen into this trap of trying to make his kingdom about them and their agenda. They try to weaponize the kingdom of heaven. They try to politicize the kingdom of heaven. We've never done that in American culture, have we? Right? We've never said you can't be a Christian if you vote like that. Or you can't be a Christian and you fill in the blank, right? Like, this is not, like, what we experienced in 2020 is nothing new. People have been trying to politicize and weaponize the kingdom of heaven and God's movement over and over again since the very beginning, right? And here all of a sudden, if we really, really want to see what God is all about, here's what, when I talk about the kingdom of heaven, to me, it's about the extension of his rule and his reign, not just in my life, but in my community. But here's the reality of it. Sometimes we try to plant the gospel, we try to say, hey, let's do this. Well, let me ask you this. How far in your life is the gospel saturating your life? What's the rule and reign of authority in your life? Are there areas, are there rooms where you're like, Jesus, you don't have authority in this one? Is your checking account surrendered to Jesus? Is your sexuality surrendered to Jesus? Remember that lunch tray analogy? A lot of times we're like, hey, Jesus, I've got this and this, but that dessert part, nope, you can't have that one. But this is what the whole idea of the kingdom of Jesus. He wants to literally saturate your life. He wants to saturate my life. And when we think about, like, hey, Jesus, I don't know if you should sit in the authority over this. It's like, hey, that's probably the next thing you need to give up and surrender to Jesus. My nutrition is probably one of the areas that Jesus is like, hey, let's surrender that. Like I was talking with Gary out there. And the idea of tacos, like tacos is awesome, right? But the problem with tacos is, for me, is I don't eat vegetables with my tacos. I just eat meat, right? Like cilantro and onions doesn't necessarily count as like a whole lot of vegetables for me. And I know I need to be eating more vegetables than anything else, but I just hate vegetables. I don't know about you, but like, it's just not good. And I continually hear Jesus saying, surrender your nutrition to me. And I continually say, yeah, because I eat the bowl of ice cream. Like, gotcha, Jesus, I hear you. Right? It's one of those things. And so the problem is, like, as we hear Jesus say, like, hey, surrender this part to us, now the next thing is we actually have to do it. Right? That's one of the hardest things about this. It's like, it's that idea, like, you know the right thing to do, but are you willing to do it? As a follower of Jesus, the followers of Jesus, we hear Jesus and we obey Jesus. If we want to be part of his kingdom, it's not just knowing the right things, it's actually putting it into practice. And this is what Isaiah will talk about. Isaiah will talk about this figure who's going to be called the Son of Man. He's going, the blind will see, the deaf will hear, and all this. And he also goes on to talk about how this person, this Messiah figure, is going to be the witness of God's love and God's power for all humanity. And what Jesus is trying to say when he uses that phrase very, very clearly of the Son of Man, he's trying to bring his audience back to Isaiah. Saying hey, are you going to bear witness of my love and of my power? And what do we see Jesus do time and time again? He extends love to people that probably don't really deserve it, right? And then he shows authority or power over certain things. Whether it's calming a storm, whether it's providing miracle food for hey, you've got thousands of people, here's a handful of fish and bread, right? He shows power over time and time again. And then, what's the very next thing we see? 2 blind men sitting on the road, coming out of Jericho. And here's a picture of this road right here. This is the same road today. And so they're sitting there, and they're crying out to Jesus. They hear, I was in a Bible class one time, and the professor said, why do you think the Bible says that, Matthew says that they heard Jesus was coming? Seems very simple, right? And it took us probably 15 minutes. These are students trying to become pastors. And we went all theological, really, really deep. And the professor's hey, geniuses, it's because they're blind. They didn't see him coming, right? And we're oh. Gotcha, right? All the answers are right in the text, right? But as they heard Jesus was coming, they start crying out. Jesus, son of David, Jesus, son of David, right? And then Jesus stops, and what does he do? He asks him, what do you want? What do you want me to do? Now, if I'm blind, it's pretty obvious, right? If I'm blind, I want to see. I'm convinced, though, that Jesus would not heal them if he don't answer this. If they don't actually humble themselves and say, I'm blind, I want to see, I think Jesus keeps going. And some of us were sitting, we are the people on the side of the road, by the way. We may not physically be blind, but there's something about us that's incomplete. There's something about you and I that we're tied to something that is holding us back in a sense. Whether it's addictions, whether that's a healing issue, whether that's there's something that's keeping us from truly, truly following Jesus for all of us. And I think Jesus, you've got his attention, and he's looking at you saying, what do you want me to do with you? What do you want me to do for you? How do you want me to heal you? And there's something powerful about saying what we need. It's not our sin that separates us from God, it's our pride that keeps us from confessing our sin that separates us from God. Right? So as these blind men are dude, we're blind, we want to see. That seems so elementary. It seems so simple. But all of a sudden that unlocks the power of Jesus. And in his power, he demonstrates his love and his power. And he heals them right there. But they keep following, don't they? The text says that they keep following Jesus. They go up to Jerusalem with him. And so, to me, as I read through this passage, there's just so much power about Jesus is on this redemption story. He's going to Jerusalem to be inaugurated. And along the way, we may miss it, right? Notice what Jesus doesn't do to the Zebedee mom. He's not you screwed up one too many times, you need to leave the crowd. He's yeah, you crossed the line, you don't even understand what we're talking about, but I'm still going to be with you. There are going to be times where you miss the agenda of Jesus. There's just part of it. And so, what I would encourage you to do in this next few moments as we head into communion, I would encourage you, Jesus, is there a place where I've missed you? Jesus, have I blocked your rule and your reign in my life? Have I said this is off limits to you? And then repent of it. And if there's things in your life that you know that are missing or incomplete, and you need the healing power of Jesus, I would encourage you just to ask Jesus, hey, in this moment, I need healing from this. I need freedom from this addiction. And confess it. And speak it out to Jesus. John chapter 1 verse 9 says this, that if we confess with our mouths that he is faithful and just, and he will forgive us. But if we don't confess it, he's not going to forgive us because there's nothing to forgive yet. We need to actually do that part of our process. So in these next few moments, as the song is played, I want to lead you through the communion elements in the sense of like, confess that, seek that out, say, Jesus, where am I actually holding this back from you? Where have I blocked your rule and your reign in my life? And allow him to come in and saturate your life. And if you need healing from something or freedom from something, confess that. What does Jesus want to do for you? And take a moment and confess that.
Lord, I
do this, make sure you hold it so your cracker doesn't fall on the ground. That'd be bad. But take the bread, and as we do this, we're going to confess our need for Jesus, and it was his body that was broken for our sacrifice. The Bible is very clear that there is no forgiveness of sins without the shedding of blood. And for thousands of years that was satisfied through animal sacrifice. But Jesus came along as the perfect sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice. And it's his sacrifice once and for all that satisfies that. And so as we drank this, we remember that it was his sacrifice, his blood that was shed, that makes us right with Jesus, or with God the Father. So do this in remembrance of him. Jesus, we come before you. And my prayer this week that the gospel, the power of the gospel, would saturate our lives. All the way through our lives, God. You want to do something great in us, and you want to do something great through us. And Jesus, there's been parts of our lives that we've blocked off to you, saying you don't have authority here yet. I pray that we would just knock down those walls and we would allow your power and your love to saturate and to permeate our lives. And we declare we need you. We confess our addictions to you. We confess our actual physical ailments to you. We confess everything to you, and we want to walk in the freedom that you offer us. And that is why you stepped out of heaven to this earth. You didn't do it so that we could have some great season in Easter around April time. You did it so that your creation could walk in freedom. To walk around complete and whole. And so, Jesus, we confess that to you. And we believe that you love us enough and you have enough power to do that in our lives. We love you, Jesus. So you know we pray this. Amen. Well, if you need prayer for anything, I would love to pray with you at the back of the green wall. Or you can text the word prayer to 219-233-2311. And I'll pray with you there as well. Church, I want you to know this to be true, that God loves you and that I love you. And as we follow him, we'll encounter the best he has to offer for us. So let's go and be the church. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.